Messiah Hampton is officially a Duck after committing to Oregon on Friday, and he joins a 2026 class that is absolutely loaded with elite-level weapons. It's a prediction program on this edition of TSOW. I've got commitment predictions for Brandon Arrington and Joey O'Brien, plus bold predictions for the 2025 Duck football season. From Coos Bay all the way to the Snake River, I've got you covered here on this edition of That Show Out West.
This place has everything. In fact, the grass is damn green in Eugene.
That performance deserves a holy wallawa.
It's a feeling you cannot explain.
This place is louder than any other venue in the Big Ten.
This program is staged to compete and to win championships.
Welcome to the Big Ten, Oregon.
Welcome to That Show Out West for That Team Out West. I'm Ted LaRue. Let's continue that countdown that we started on last week's show, that we are going to be continuing through the summer months until we get to that final week in August. How about 73 days until the Oregon Ducks welcome in the defending FCS runner-up Montana State Bobcats into Watson Stadium for the kickoff, the season opener of this much-anticipated upcoming season. You know, I've got some people in my inner circle, I've got some family, and I got some friends that I talk to almost daily that ask me, Ted, what do you talk about in the middle of June on a college football podcast? What do people want to know about Oregon football in the middle of the summer? And I do exactly that. I chuckle to myself and say, yeah, there's a lot to talk about. There is a lot on the minds of the Oregon Duck faithful. You know that. I know that. There's a lot of anticipation, especially what's going on the Oregon recruiting trail. And you best know we are going to get in our covered wagons. We are going to get in our stagecoaches for the first half of today's show, certainly here today. And I kind of say to them as well, it's like there's a lot going on now. And when I take the first of two significant trips out west, camping into the mountains in late June and early July, there's so much going on that I know that I'm going to miss a lot. Now, one thing that I didn't miss was that Friday afternoon, holy wallawa, the Messiah Hampton commitment announcement, and he chose the good guys. He chose to fly with the flock. He chose to commit to the Oregon Ducks. Now, this was expected by many industry experts across multiple media outlets, but kudos to Ross Douglas for sealing the deal on the number one player in the state of New York. And ever since Caden Dixon Wyatt's commitment announcement, this was really one of the top targets, and this was really one of the top priorities recruiting-wise for this Oregon coaching staff. Now, that announcement came on Friday afternoon. Just a couple of hours before that announcement, I got a much-needed weekender vacation, a shorter vacation, a camping trip up to northern Minnesota. Friday was a little bit of a rough day for yours truly, so it really gave me the opportunity to clear my mind. And when I heard that news, I'm driving up north, and I'm sitting on the shores of Lake Superior during this last week, and it really gave me time to think about a lot of things, but it really gave me time to think about really the grand scale of this Messiah Hampton commitment. And not only what it maybe means in a phone booth, we'll talk really about Hampton's commitment and what it means within that phone booth, but really what it means in the grand scale of things. And what it really means in the grand scale of things, he is yet another elite weapon in a 2026 class that is full of great elite level weapons. Now, let's really focus in on Messiah Hampton right now. We talked about Ross Douglas. This was him maximizing his relationships. And I want to really expound on relationships here for a minute, because I think when Junior Adams was the wide receivers coach, Chris Henry Jr., Caden Dixon-Wyatt. He really formed a foundation, I think, with both those guys. Now, I'm not the first person to talk about this. Max Torres and Justin Hopkins did a really good job touching on this on the latest edition of the Ducks Dish podcast, so make sure you go and check that out. But it's really tough when you're a new position coach to really try to rebuild almost and really live up to that foundation that was already laid. But here's the other thing about relationships. You got to maximize on the ones that you're already built. Although Ross Douglas maybe wasn't able to rebuild and really take it up a notch where Junior Adams left off with those two guys. We know Chris Henry Jr. shutting down his commitment. We know Caden Dixon-Wyatt choosing Ohio State over Oregon. But Ross Douglas was recruiting Messiah Hampton when he was still the wide receivers coach at Syracuse. Messiah was the first offer for Ross Douglas when he became the head coach at Oregon. He saw a great rising talent, and Messiah has been one of the fastest and biggest risers over the last handful of months at the wide receiver position in these recruiting rankings right now. And he sealed the deal and he took advantage of it. I said a couple of shows ago, we're really going to find out the recruiting chops that Ross Douglas has, sealing the deal. Now let's see if he can continue it with maybe some of these other prospects, one of which that has been on campus recently, one that is going to be on Oregon's campus here very, very soon. Okay, so we got that covered. Now let's maybe look to this 2026 class from a macro level. Man, the next generation of wide receivers here at Oregon could very well be the best. We know about last year. Super Frosh, Decorian Moore. He's going to be expected to step in and be wide receiver one from the outset. A lot of really good things said this spring about Cooper Perry, who comes a 4-star who is from the state of Arizona. Now you've got Gatlin Bear, who's expected to come in 2026. He was a 5-star from the state of Idaho, of course, took that Mormon mission. And now you've got Messiah Hampton. The level of recruiting expectations at the wide receiver position. And I even like scrolling through Scoop Duck and really monitoring the fan base and really what they're expecting, not only from maybe this Hampton recruitment and the way they expected it to go, but some of these other recruitments and how many of these blue chip wide receivers that the Oregon fan base expects to get. They are setting a new bar at the wide receiver position, and I cannot wait to see the careers and how these guys really end up playing. I don't think Messiah is necessarily the best player out of this group or will be the best player. I think that's definitely going to be Decorian Moore. I think Gatlin Bear is another guy that could have a really good career when all is said and done at Oregon, but you don't have to be the best player. You don't have to be the number one to be a super impactful player. I think Messiah and his ability to catch and run after he gets the ball in his hands, I think is going to be one of the biggest skill sets that he has to offer for future editions of this Oregon offense. And like we talk about those 4 guys, and those 4 guys are really, really good, but Jalen Lott, Calvin Russell, these are guys that Oregon is in big time contention for. So I know it looks really, really good right now, and I know there's a lot of optimism, but I think this is far from done. I think this is potentially far from done in the 2026 class for Oregon at the wide receiver position. Now, you look at that with Hampton joining that group at wide receiver. Like, you could probably stop this segment right here. But you look at 2 more guys that really expound on the fact and the point that I'm trying to make when you look at this 26 class. Guys that have shut down their recruitments, guys that are ironclad in their commitments to the Oregon Ducks, that being tight end Kendre Harrison and that being running back Tredarian Ball. Like, Kendre is going to keep that tight end machine going. I talked about it a couple of months where Oregon is just, they're taking their tight end play, a lot like the wide receiver play that I just talked about, but they're taking that tight end play to a new level. Terrence Ferguson in top 3s and top 5s all times in Oregon tight end receiving records. And then you look at what Kenyon Sadiq is expected to do. And Kendre Harrison is just, he's a little bit different than Kenyon Sadiq. He's a little bit taller. He's a little bit different of a tight end and a little bit different of an athletic freak, but I'm so excited to see what he can do. And I think that he could have an impact a little bit sooner than later, because when you look at Kenyon Sadiq, like, I think that this is probably like a 1-year guy. The NFL scouts are already drooling over him right now, and he really hasn't had that big season. I honestly believe it's going to be really hard to keep Kenyon Sadiq on campus past this 2025 season. Once Kendra Harrison comes in as a true freshman, you're probably going to have Jamari Johnson in there. I think he's going to see quite a bit of play in that 2026 season. One guy that I really love in this class, man, is Mr. Ball that can do it all, Tredarian Ball. Now, I don't throw around this comparison lightly, but I think he has the skill set to be like a DeAnthony Thomas 2.0 type of weapon in this offense. Do you see like some trend where all of these players are a little bit different and Oregon has their bases covered as it pertains to weapons on the offensive side of the ball with a lot of different players? I think Tredarian Ball can legitimately be a starting running back or a starting wide receiver for the Ducks in the future. How about 777 yards, 11 scores rushing, plus 44 catches, over 1,000 yards receiving, and 14 touchdowns last season? Yeah, he's got, you hear those numbers, and I think if you're an Oregon fan, you think of DeAnthony Thomas. Do I necessarily see him as Oregon's number one running back for a couple of consecutive years? I'm not sure if I see that, especially when you got guys like a De'Ara Hill and a Jordan Davison that I think really fit in as maybe that true running back type of guy. But man, I love having the ultimate weapon of Tredarian Ball, no doubt. Like, you look at what 2027 could feature. 2027 could see the final year of Decorian Moore. It could be a second year Gatlin Barrett, Kendra Harrison, Tredarian Ball, and Messiah Hampton. And you could have a top transfer quarterback with Ryder Lyons as a true freshman. Okay, the mark of a truly great college football program in today's day and age, where it's hard to retain talent, it's hard to stack talent, is the ability to really have this type of talent continue to come into your team, to continue to come in to your organization and keep out pumping out great football teams. Dan Lanning and the Ducks have certainly done that. I am just drooling and salivating over the sheer amount of weapons that future additions of the Oregon Ducks are going to have. Oregon fans are certainly pumped up about having Messiah Hampton in the fold going forward, but that is in the past, ladies and gentlemen. It is time to look to the future. Now, when I say the future, I'm not talking about a week from now. I'm not talking 2 weeks from now. I'm not talking about a month from now. I'm talking about tomorrow. I'm talking about the next day. Brandon Arrington is set to commit tomorrow. He moved his commitment date up to June 19th. Joey O'Brien is set to commit the very next day on June 20th. And really, we've been expecting a commitment announcement from five-star safety Jett Washington ever since the weekend. So get your popcorn ready. Have those beers on ice. Have them in the cooler. Get ready to crack them. Because when I talked about that DB Hall 2.0 that I talked about a handful of shows ago, this is the time where we could start to see that Hall form. Now, I'm going to maybe turn into a little bit of, I'm going to put that Marshall hat on that he wears to work every day. I'm going to turn into maybe an assistant coach or a coordinator or a head coach, Dan Lanning. And this is kind of my pitch for these guys to come to Eugene. I think that this group of defensive backs, combined with last year's group, has the potential to create something truly generational and truly something special at Oregon. You go back to that aforementioned group last year. Naeem Offord, Trey McNutt, Dorian Brew, Brandon Finney, all top 75 overall players consensus in the recruiting classes last year. And then you look at the type of talent, the length, the speed, the height, the skills of all of these players match every single one of the traits that Chris Hampton is looking for, that Tosh Lapoy is looking for, that Dan Lanning is looking for. I think the selling point to each and every single one of these guys that are set to commit very, very soon, be a part of something truly special. Be a part of the Legion of Boom College Edition. Be a part of one of the best secondaries in recent memory. Okay, we know there's a lot of talent in this room. Good. We're going to get all of you guys to the NFL at some point. Like, you don't need to be a starter for 3 consecutive years. You don't maybe even need to be a starter for 2 consecutive years to be a high-level NFL draft pick. Be a part of something that is going to carry the defense, and the defense is going to carry this team to the first ever national championship. There is truly an opportunity to build an elite level secondary, the one of which that we maybe haven't seen in a very, very long time. Will these guys really lean into that? It remains to be seen, but I truly believe that is what the coaching staff is trying to do. That's why I believe they brought all 3 of these guys onto campus on the same weekend in the first week of June to sell all of them at the same time. You can all be a part of something special. We can build a generational secondary here at the University of Oregon. Okay, let's get into each one of these recruitments. I am going to make a prediction, and I got a bonus prediction for Jett Washington coming at you as well. Let's start first, and let's set it all up with Brandon Arrington. Now, things have kind of really been very fluid lately. Things have certainly been changing a lot with Brandon. Like, originally, he was slated to commit on July 5th. And Oregon was slated to have that visit, his last visit, like June 20th, 21st, 22nd, sometime during that frame. And now that visit is where Texas A&M is slotted, just a day or two after the time that he is set to commit, which is going to be tomorrow. So there's been certainly some things shifting around. The original report is, although you love to have the last visit, Oregon moving up their visit, I think, was seen as a positive at the time because something that I already mentioned of having all 3 of these elite level defensive backs on campus at the very same time. We're going to keep on coming back to that because I think that is a very important distinction, and I think that is certainly intentional by this Oregon coaching staff, certainly right now. Now, when I really set things up for this Brandon Arrington prediction of where I think he's going to go, I think there are some things that are certainly trending in Texas A&M's direction. He has been on Texas A&M's campus more than anybody. Texas A&M was the prediction from Steve Wiltfong back, I think, like during the season last year. Texas A&M was setting the pace for this recruitment during the season. And now Oregon has really made a significant push here, certainly as of late. And then it's got that like Messiah Hampton feel where he set his commitment date and just a day or two later, he's set to go to College Station, Texas. Like, I think there's a lot that really blends into Brandon Arrington moving over to Texas A&M. But here's, I think, how I feel about it. Here's how I'm going to frame it with the Ducks right now. I think moving up his commitment date was very significant because I think he very easily could have let this thing play out. He could have let all the visits play out. He could have visited Texas A&M there in that third weekend in June, and he could have committed over there on July 5th, and that would have been that. But I honestly believe that there might be something brewing with a handful of these guys to maybe get a double quack on the same day. I think there's something to be said about the timing of when all of these commitments are certainly happening right now. I think moving up his commitment date, I think, is very significant. He visited Oregon, and then he visited Alabama. And now Alabama's out of the race. So the most recent visit of the 2 teams that he's taken is the Oregon Ducks right now. Where do I think that Brandon Arrington is going to go? This really comes down to a little bit of a gut feeling. Oregon has put a lot of resources, man, into this recruitment. It feels like they have been saving their NIL dollars. And speaking of NIL, there's people out there that are saying Texas A&M has a better money offer right now, but I just got this gut feeling, and I kind of get this throughout these past recruiting cycles where it seems like there are a lot of bullet points maybe stacked up against Dan Lanning, but he finds a way to pull it off because that is a recruitment that they are truly invested in. I could see a late bag coming in for Brandon Arrington. My prediction, it's that gut feeling, And I think it's the shifting around of the timeline and moving up the commitment date that favors Brandon Arrington to go to Oregon. That is my pick for the Mount Miguel corner out of San Diego, California. Now, that would be one 5-star commitment for the Oregon Ducks. I think this is going to take place tomorrow. This is going to take place Thursday. I believe the next guy is going to commit based on this announcement. So, what am I predicting right now? I am predicting a double quack on Thursday with Jett Washington also announcing his commitment that day as well. 2 5-star defensive backs committing on the same day, ladies and gentlemen. I think that's the way I see it going down right now. Like, I think some people were really anticipating Jett Washington was going to make his announcement maybe over the weekend, maybe on Monday, maybe on Tuesday, and this thing has kind of gotten delayed a little bit. Maybe it's gotten delayed because when these guys were on campus and after these guys were on campus together, maybe they're talking and say, hey, let's line up our dates a little bit. Let's make an impact at the very same time. Let's see a couple of duck emojis from the Coach Dan Lanning Twitter account as well. Now, the next day is when we are going to see Joey O'Brien make his commitment. Now, out of all of these, this is probably the one that I maybe feel the least confident about. Even though it really appears that Oregon and Notre Dame are in a heat for this one. Now, his official Final Four, Oregon, Penn State, Notre Dame, and Clemson, it certainly appears right now. Where do I think that this one is going to go? I do not think that Oregon is going to pull off a clean sweep. There's been a lot of smoke and a lot of momentum for Notre Dame on the recruiting trail and what Marcus Freeman is doing right now in South Bend. I believe Joey O.B. commits to the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. But folks, landing Brandon Arrington, landing Jett Washington, yeah, that would qualify as the heat and the solstice of the summer of Dan. I said at the beginning of the show that this was a predictions program, and I am certainly going to deliver on my promise. Now, we are going to move from some high school recruitment commitment predictions to some bold predictions for the 2025 season. We're about 2.5 months or so until the season is about to begin. We got a long way to go and a lot of things can happen, but I am ready to put it all out on the line. I want to hear your bold predictions in the comments below on YouTube. If you're listening on audio, if you're listening on podcast, make sure you at me on Twitter, at Ted on the Ducks. Email that showoutwest@gmail.com. However you want to get in touch with me, I want to hear all of your bold predictions. I love to hear it. I love to hear it this time of year where we've still got a ways to go until we kick this season off. So without further ado, let's put it up there on the screen for those of you on YouTube, and let's get into it for all of you podcast listeners as well. Now, I am going to talk a lot about the between the lines predictions about like the football season and football team, but I want to start with a bold recruiting prediction. Dan Lanning is known as the Flipmaster. Dan Lanning always seems to finish extremely strong in the month of December during the early signing period. Last cycle, it was Naeem Offord, flipping the number 1 player in the state of Alabama, a top defensive back. Of course, Ohio State was in there. Auburn was also involved as well, but he ended up donning the green and yellow O on signing day. My first bold prediction, I think he's going to pull another one, and I think it's going to be another top defensive player. The top edge rusher in the country, one of the top overall players in this cycle, Zion Ely, I believe is going to flip to Oregon by the time we get close to signing day. Now, let me break this one down. Oregon was the favorite for Zion Ely for a very long time before he committed to Maryland, before that recruitment was shut down. You have to imagine there was a good amount of cash that was involved in that type of decision for him, but Now, what have we seen recruiting-wise from some of these DMV and these local Maryland players? Maryland was initially someone for Emmanuel Ihinacho. They've dropped out of the race. Jaira Edwards, another great player from that area. Certainly doesn't look like the Terps are going to land him. Now it kind of looks like Zion Ely is on a little bit of an island. And like, he is an elite pass rusher. He is an elite football player that can make a difference at high-level programs fairly early in his career. Now, let's talk about Maryland for just a minute. Last year was a bad season. They won only one Big Ten game, beating the USC Trojans in the middle of the season in an absolutely crazy game. This season, I do not think that they are going to be a good team. I don't think that they're going to be an improved football team. Let me put my Big Ten Ted hat here for just a minute. Like, I think Maryland's going to be one of the bottom feeders in the conference. I really believe that. Billy Edwards transferred out. They got like UCLA's backup from last year is now their starting quarterback. They got that true freshman in Malik Washington. There was some decent players that transferred out of this program. I think ever since Talia Tagovailoa has left College Park, Maryland, it's been clear that Mike Locksley has this program in a downward trajectory. You need to be able to sell hope. You need to be able to sell optimism. If Maryland has another like a 3-9 season or another 4-8 season, it's really hard to keep on convincing people to come back in to the stadium, to be able to convince people to spend this type of money in relation to the Maryland program, whether it's in recruiting or transfer portal or whatever else. If Mike Locksley indeed gets fired and they decide to go in another direction, I believe that door is going to open for Zion Ely once again. And when that door is open, I think Dan Lanning is going to be the first one there. I honestly believe that. They were, like I said before, they were a big-time player early on in his recruitment. I think that is going to be the big signing day flip. I think my bold prediction is you're going to see Zion Ely, you're going to see Richard Wesley, you're going to see a fantastic edge rusher tandem sign on the dotted line in the early signing period for the Oregon Ducks in December. All right, now let's get to some on-the-field bold predictions. The Ducks will not have a 1,000-yard rusher in the regular season. In the regular season is a very key distinction here. Now, Oregon has been built on 1,000-yard rushers, having 1,000-yard ball carriers in 17 of the past 20 seasons. Ted, how could they not have a 1,000-yard rusher? Let me break it down for you. I view Mekhi Hughes transferring in. Now, this is maybe not complete apples to oranges, and just because something happened in the past doesn't at another university doesn't mean that it's going to happen here at Oregon. But I think I see some similarities in this. I kind of see Mekhi Hughes in the same vein as Quinshon Judkins, who transferred over to Ohio State last year. Quinshon Judkins, his freshman year, his sophomore year, like early in his career, he put up, I think it was like combined for like 2,500 yards in 2 seasons at Ole Miss. He transfers over to Ohio State. I'm sure money had something to do with that, but he transfers over to Ohio State to be a part of a championship team, to be a part of a winner. I think Mekhi Hughes is in the same boat. He's averaged right around 1,400 yards per season in those 2 seasons over at Tulane. But I believe that this Oregon running back room is as deep as we've seen in a very long time. I'm really excited about Noah Whittington. I am thrilled about Noah Whittington. Last year, he was coming off of an injury, but man, in that second half of the season, when he really got going, I think he really showed what he can do. I looked at Noah Whittington in the spring game. Now, I know spring game, it's just a couple of reps. It is what it is. Spring practice was closed off to the media, so we don't have as much access. We don't have as many data points to really go off of. But man, I saw some pop. I saw some pop and some explosiveness in his step in the couple of reps and the couple of carries that he got during that spring game. I think Noah Whittington is going to have the best season that he's had as an Oregon Duck. Go back to 2022, 779 yards and 5 touchdowns. I think we could see Noah Whittington in that like 800, 820, maybe even upwards of like 840 or 850 yards on the ground. Rashad Sample said it in the spring. He wants to get as many people involved. He wants to call the NCAA. He wants to say, hey, we want to play with 2 footballs. And that really told me, I think they're going to try to utilize everything in this room. We've heard a lot of really good things about Dink Riggs. Now, I do not believe Dink Riggs this season is going to rush for 700 or 800, 900 yards. But I could very well see a breakdown where Mekhi Hughes is the leading rusher, but Will Whittington is definitely that 1B back where Mekhi rushes like in the mid 900-yard range. Mekhi Hughes is in that, lower to mid 800-yard range. And then I think you could see Dink Riggs maybe in that like 300 to 400-yard range. And then you factor in some carries for Jade Lamar, maybe some short yardage carries for Jay Harris, certainly in there as well. I think that this is going to be as deep of a run game as we have seen. And that's a good thing. Just because Oregon might not have a 1,000-yard rusher doesn't automatically mean it's a bad thing. We're going to see a more guys, I think, get more carries within this run game this season. Let's move on to the next one, and it kind of has to do with the run game. Let's talk about the offensive line. Back-to-back years, they've won the Joe Moore Award. Make it 3. Or that they haven't won the Joe Moore Award. They've been a finalist. I should correct myself. They've been a finalist for the Joe Moore Award 3 in a row. I think Oregon once again is going to be a finalist for a Joe Moore Award. I love these transfers. I'm really starting to warm up to these transfers that Oregon brought in this past season. I've got a lot of confidence in the middle of the offensive line with Iapani Olu, also known as Pancho and Pranon in the middle. Like Pranon, if he would have went out to the NFL draft, he might have been like a mid-round pick, a 4th or a 5th round pick. I got a lot of confidence that those 2 guys in the middle are going to work out really well. I think Isaiah World can be a next-level pass blocker. I think Alex Harkey is as good of a run blocker as you're going to see at the tackle position. I think because of the experience that these guys have, now not necessarily the experience together, but because of the experience that they have, I think that's going to pay off. I don't think you're going to see as much shuffling. I don't think you're going to see as much shifting. I think that this is a team that's going to protect Dante Moore really well. And I think like the pieces around them, like, the Joe Moore Award is usually awarded to teams that have good offensive production, right? Because if an offensive line is protecting the passer, it usually means that the quarterback is throwing the football and throwing for a lot of yards down the field. If the running backs are going for a lot of yards, it usually means that the offensive line is doing a pretty good job in run blocking. I think that this offensive line is going to be awarded as a finalist. And maybe, just maybe, they might win the whole damn thing this season. Alik Terry raved about the size of these offensive line transfers during the spring. I think they're going to be able to bully some teams around. I think they're going to be one of the better offensive lines out there. Now, that might not seem ultra bold. I think out of all of these, that might be the least bold. Let's go on to the next one. Dan Lanning will win Big Ten Head Coach of the Year. Now, we've seen what Dan Lanning can do with experienced transfers. We've seen what Dan Lanning can do with maybe more experienced players. But I think what's going to stand out to Dan Lanning's peers this year, and everybody's talking about it nationally, everybody's saying, well, they don't have that ultra experienced quarterback. They don't have a Dylan Gabriel and Bo Nix, 2 of the most experienced quarterbacks in college football history. They don't have that. They don't have Josh Connerly at tackle. They don't have this guy, and they don't have that guy. They're really leaning on these Dan Lanning recruiting classes. And I think Dan and this entire coaching staff is going to do a really great job. And they're going to show, I think, how strong of a coaching staff they are. Kenyon Barner recently talked about this on the Ducks of a Feather podcast, is this year might be more about the coaches than it is about the players, because this is really the vision in recruiting that has been sold to really get to this point, to really get these players on the field. And if Dan Lanning is able to really keep that standard up, go like 11-1 this season, I think he's going to be looked very favorable in this Big Ten head coach voting. I know it usually goes to guys that come out of nowhere. David Braun won it a couple of years ago. Of course, Kurt Cignetti won it last year. It's usually like that worst to first type of award, but I kind of look around the Big Ten. I don't know if I necessarily see a team that's in a favorable position to do that. So I think they're going to give it to somebody that's been a proven head coach, hasn't won Big Ten Head Coach of the Year, but that's kind of working with maybe a little bit less, even though you and I know the roster is pretty damn talented. But nationally, they might view it as working with a lot of young players, working with a little bit less, and still achieving a similar result. Dan, the man, might finally get his recognition when all is said and done. Last thing I'm going to be talking about is the defense. The defense will have 6, count them 6, all Big Ten players. Now, when I talk about all Big Ten, first team, second team, third team, I'm not talking about honorable mention. To put it into context, last year they had 4 all Big Ten players. Now, 3 of them were on the defensive line. And I believe that we could see 3 defensive line all Big Ten players once again. Now, you had Theron Johnson, who transferred in from Northwestern, who is also all Big Ten last season. But when I really start to break down the defense, Mateo Uwayangalele, he was an all Big Ten player last year. Bryce Betcher was an all Big Ten player last year. So you're already starting with 2. Dylan Thieneman, now he was honorable mention last year when he had 6 interceptions during his freshman year. He was all Big Ten. So you have 3 guys already right off the bat that have been all Big Ten. If you want to throw out Theron Johnson as well, that's 4 right there. But I think you're going to see Amari Washington really step up into an all Big Ten type of level. I think that he's going to be fantastic. I think that this is really going to be a year where he's going to step up and really show why he was that next guy behind Derek Harmon, behind Jamari Caldwell last year, and played as much in the rotation as much as he did. I think Bear Alexander, we talked about it on the last show. What if Bear Alexander plays at an all Big Ten level? I think that he's got the talent to play at an all Big Ten level. I think that, and I've said this before, I think this defensive line is as good as there is. And I think that the people are going to see how good this group is, and you could once again see 3, for the second consecutive year, 3 Oregon defensive linemen awarded with all conference. I talked about Betcher. I talked about Thieneman. Now you got to find one more. Watch out. Not saying he'll win first or second team, but he could slide into that third team. Watch out for corner Ife Obadegwu. I know there's some other guys that could certainly step up at other positions, and I think it would be a defensive back and be in that role. But, man, I think Ife is a guy that can really stand out. And if some of the rumblings in the spring are correct, a lot of people see him as the top corner on this roster. I think he's going to be recognized as one of the top defensive backs in the Big Ten, and that gets us to 6 all Big Ten players. That's what I got. I'm putting it all out on the line. Once again, let's hear your bold predictions in the comments below. I talk about it ad nauseum because it's really like the main talking point, overall macro type of point when you talk about the 2025 Ducks. And a lot of people nationally, this is kind of the first main point that they talk about when they talk about the Quack Attack for this season. Oh, it's an inexperienced football team. They're losing so much. They've got a lot to prove if they want to remain at that level that they've been at. And they have a lot of players on this football team that have to go out there and prove it. So I've got 6 players that I believe have the most to prove in 2025. Let's jump into the list. Why don't we? Now, for those of you on YouTube, you might be screaming, Ted, wait a minute, hard stop. Where is Decorian Moore on this list? You got the Super Frost 5-star highest rated receiver that Oregon has ever gotten. He's never stepped foot on a college football field. You've got the Evan Stewart injury. Doesn't he have something to prove? Doesn't he have to prove the hype? I get that. I understand that. I can certainly hear that. But I think that this list is for a different kind of player, because I think this staff understands and they know the type of talent that Decorian Moore is. He's, I think, graduated from this list. I think now, instead of maybe, hey, he's got to go prove something, it's like, oh yeah, we know how talented you are. We know what you are. We know who you are. You've got pressure and expectations. You got to be that number one guy. Number one has got to be number one. So I think he's kind of beyond this list. I think that this list is maybe for a different type of situation and a little bit of a different type of player than Decorian Moore is. And it's kind of hard to put a true freshman on this list of like, yeah, Obviously, true freshmen have a lot to prove. I could put Naeem Offord on this list. I could put Trey McNutt. I could have this list full of true freshmen. So that's kind of maybe why I don't have Decory and Moore on this list. Okay, now that being said and that being established, let's get into it. The first one that really stands out to me that I think has a lot to prove, linebacker Devin Jackson. I think that there is a expectation this year that the two inside linebackers, the Mac and the Money, are pretty established. We know what Bryce Betcher is, and I think a lot of people are expecting Devin Jackson to really slide up into that role alongside Bryce to be a consistent, reliable starter. Now, we saw Devin a little bit last season. We know Jeffrey Bossa was in there. Some guys, there was a rotation. Some guys were banged up, certainly throughout the season. And Devin, pound for pound, might be the fastest player on this football team. And we saw certainly some flashes, but the linebacker room, I know Bryce had a really good season, but I think when you really take the linebacker room as a whole, I don't know if it's maybe been the best position group throughout the Dan Lanning era, but I think this year there is an expectation for that linebacker room to be really, really good. And what does Devin Jackson need to prove? He needs to prove that he can be a guy that can be reliable. He needs to be a guy that they can count on. I don't think Bryce Betcher is going to be the fastest sideline-to-sideline player. I think that he's more of a north and south linebacker. Devin Jackson has to prove that he can be that speed guy that can get to the outside and maybe make some of those plays. And he needs to be able to prove that some of these young linebackers and the depth isn't going to take his spot. And that he needs to be able to be counted on in some of those situations as well. Like Dan Lanning, when he was asked after the spring game, hey, you going to go out into the portal? You going to go out and get a transfer linebacker? He said, no, I love the depth. And that really instilled a lot of confidence in me in the depth. But maybe there's one of these players, like Jerry Mixon. He's a guy that's been in the program for a few years now. Maybe this is him stepping up. Maybe he's the guy that really steps up into that role. If Devin, remember Devin, banged up during the spring, did not play in the spring game. And then you see what Jerry Mixon did in the spring game. You see what Braden Platt certainly showed flashes of in the spring game. So I think Devin's got something to prove, considering how this staff views the rest of this linebacker room. Let's go to the offensive side of the football. I think Jurion Dickey certainly has something to prove. He has to prove that he has put his issues behind him. I know he's had some weight issues. He's had some injury issues. Like, he's had a multitude. A former 5-star type of guy. And when Oregon brings in a 5-star, they expect him to be an impact player. They expect him to live up to maybe like an all-conference type of level. Jurion Dickey needs to be able to prove that he can get to that 5-star ceiling that this Oregon coaching staff expected him to be at when he stepped on campus. And obviously now without Evan Stewart, he's got to prove that he can step in and be a significant player on this offense, maybe on the outside opposite of somebody like a Decory and Moore. He needs to be able to prove that the reset in the room with Ross Douglas taking over is a benefit to him on the outside. There's going to be somebody that's going to step up as another playmaker on this team. Jurion needs to prove that he can be that guy that can be relied upon. I talked to somebody that was there for spring practice, and they said this was the best spring of Jurion Dickey's career. He needs to prove that that spring wasn't just a fluke, and he can go into fall camp and he can go into the season playing at that type of level. Let's talk about an obvious one on defense, and it's Bear Alexander. Like, he's kind of in that same boat as, hey, can you prove that 5-star ceiling like Jurion Dickey that we just talked about? Bear Alexander's got all the traits. He's got all the high marks. He's got he's got everything that it takes to be an all-conference, to be a beast up front. We've all seen the pictures of him in the weight room flexing, looking like a literal grizzly bear. All he's missing is that hump on the back of their neck that those Grizzlies have out in the wild. But he needs to prove the doubters wrong, because there is a talking point. There is a stigma, I think, that's approached to Bear Alexander, that maybe he's a little bit of a problem. Maybe there's something kind of going on upstairs as to why he hasn't gotten to that level. This is now his third school. There's all of this. Whether that's true or whether it's not, he needs to prove that Oregon is the opportunity that can get him to his highest level and make this one of the best defensive lines in all of college football. Another fairly obvious one is at quarterback, Dante Moore. Couple of things. He needs to prove his teammates right. Tez Johnson at the Rose Bowl media availability says, yeah, he's going to be a Heisman finalist next year. DeCorian Moore in that interview with Ryan Clark says, yeah, he's going to win the Heisman this year. Like, there's a lot of hype. There's a lot of people in Oregon circles that are saying Dante Moore is just different. He needs to prove that hype correct. And on the other side, there are doubters with Dante Moore that said, I don't know, that season at UCLA is still lingering. He didn't play college football last season. He needs to prove that that he has significantly improved his skill set, that he has improved his decision-making since UCLA. He needs to prove that he can be the guy, the true leader of this team, that this coaching staff can count on. That when you get late in the season, when you're on the road in the beginning of November at Iowa, and you're in a rock fight, and it's a 3rd and 7, that this guy can take the reins of this team. Everybody can look to him, and he can lead a drive. Bo Nix, Dylan Gabriel, experienced guys. They'd been there and done that. Dante Moore hasn't really been there and done that. He needs to prove throughout this season that he can be the guy that Will Stein and this coaching staff can rely on when throws and plays need to be made during football games. Let's head back to the defensive side of the ball, and let's talk about Jaleel Florence. Now, there's a lot of people talking about the battles and all the young guys in the secondary, and man, there's a lot of people, and there's a lot of names, and there's a lot of stars attached to these names, but Jaleel Florence is coming off of an injury, and Jaleel Florence needs to prove that he can get back. He's a veteran corner that can return back to that 2023 form. I think, and there have been other podcasts that I've listened to that say if Jaleel Florence is healthy in 2024, he may have been the top corner for the Ducks last season. So I think he's got a lot to prove this season with so many names being floated out there, with Ife Obadegwu being floated out there, with maybe some of these true freshmen getting a little bit of run this season that says, no, there's a reason why I was turned to, and there's a reason why I saw the field as much in 2023. So he's got to prove that he can certainly get over that injury hump and he can return to that form this season and maybe be the starting quarter opposite of Ife Obadegwu, possibly on the other side. Last one, Isaiah World, and I've talked about him recently as well. He needs to prove that there isn't going to be a significant drop-off from Josh Connerly leaving that left tackle spot. He needs to prove that the people that are saying that he can be a top 10 pick, the people are saying that he can be a top 15, people that are saying that he can be drafted higher than Josh Connerly, that he can be a first-round NFL draft pick, he needs to be able to prove that hype correct, that he can make that jump from the group of 6, from the Mountain West, up to the Big Ten and still be able to play at that level. He needs to be able to prove that they can count on him in one-on-one type of situations against the top pass rusher from the other team, and he is going to give Dante Moore time to throw the football down the field. There's a lot of proving that needs to be done for Oregon this season. I do have confidence, though, that these 6 players will positively prove that they will be impact guys to make a difference for the Ducks this upcoming season. Another great edition of that Show Out West in the books here, and I'm looking forward to the future, certainly. I am unsure if there will be a show next week. Next week, as I said at the beginning of the show, I am leaving on a camping trip for Montana, so I may or may not be able to squeeze one in. If I do, it will probably be a condensed, shorter show, but I'll make sure I let you guys know about that. So, until next time, whenever that may be, I'm Ted LaRue. We'll see you in the next edition of That Show Out West.